Welcome, everyone, to the Inclusion Podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Kostman.
And I'm Dr. Christy Preddy-Franzak. We're so glad you're here as we explore all things inclusion.
So whether you're a school leader, an educator, a parent, or simply passionate about inclusion, this podcast is for you.
In each episode, we go beyond the usual conversations, diving into what truly makes inclusive education work.
Together, let's make a difference, one conversation at a time. Here we go. Today, we are diving into the power of communication, and specifically, how is it that school leaders can very clearly, confidently, and compassionately talk about inclusive education with families and with staff? So whether you're shifting outdated special ed practices or strengthening your co-teaching or your universal design for learning, or just starting this journey, this episode is all about how do we change our script. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, so there's a couple things you did, Julie, that I loved out of the gate. I love a good alliteration. So clear, confident, and compassionate. I want to go work there.
Yeah.
And then I love that you said there's a script for change, because sometimes for me, just even if the script sucks, to be honest, it's a great leaning tool, or it's a great way for me to feel confident that I can do it, even if I throw it out. You know what I mean?
Well, it starts you someplace, Christy. And I think for school leaders, your heads are pulled in so many directions.
Yeah.
Your heart is pulled in so many directions. Your mind is pulled in so many directions. And literally coming up with exactly how to say the stuff that you need to say can feel really taxing on your nervous system. And so what we want to do is give you something today that will just help in many, many situations, give you a starting point about how to have these incredibly important conversations.
Yeah. And these scripts that we're going to share in the download for this episode are really for people who have managed change successfully. And so, but I would say they're adaptable. I think families could use them in advocating for inclusion. I think teachers can use them as they justify their efforts to really push for inclusion and to close specialized programs. So it's really reusable content. So at inclusiveschooling.com/download 67, you'll get the scripts that Julie and I are going to talk through today, but just know that you can always adapt them for your situation or your role. We're going to speak from those guiding systems level change, but know that you can always use these as a starting point in different ways.
That's really helpful, Christy. So just to reiterate, we're going to speak to the school administrator, and yet anybody in any role can take this and use it in new ways. So I really like that you said that.
Anybody who's kind of facing pushback, or maybe even just being proactive, right, Julie? We don't have to use my negativity bias of a mind, but these could be very proactive before everybody gets all twitchy and worried. This could be a way to set the stage as well,
so that everybody's excited and confident.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So I'm just going to kind of explain what this is so that people can know that you want this download. Honestly, if you turn this podcast off and go grab this download and read it to yourself and start to use it, you're going to be super jazzed about it. But I want to just kind of I want both of us to share with folks, with leaders who are doing this work, a little bit of the behind the scenes, the tips and tricks that you can use when you're using these particular scripts and why we put it together. So what you'll see is that there's an opening statement, and it's really to ground any meeting or conversation. And I'm going to read the opening statement, Christy, so people can kind of hear what it might sound like to create one of these.
Yeah. And when Julie ever does a read aloud, sometimes I like to close my eyes. For those of you on a treadmill or driving, don't do it. But if you can, just kind of sit back and notice the words, kind of like in the opening statement when I noticed that alliteration. Notice what words kind of strike you as important, or how these sort of set the stage for what's possible.
Yeah. And so picture in this particular case that you're a school leader and you're really committed to more inclusive practices, and you are saying this out loud to the entire staff. So it might be like this. We're shifting toward more inclusive practices because research shows students learn better when they have access to the full curriculum, access to meaningful peer interactions, and access to tailored support within the classroom. Students will continue receiving all of their services, accommodations, and individualized support as outlined in their IEP. So that statement does a lot of things, Christy. What does it do in your mind?
Well, the first thing, you go first, Julie, because
Mhm.
my negativity bias must be on high alert today. 'Cause I had a thought about what if I have a crappy IEP? So you go
Oh,
first, because we're
wow.
trying to talk about possibilities and setting the stage.
Okay, we'll just shut that part of you
But yeah,
down for a
we'll come
moment.
back to it.
Okay. So for me, what I liked is that it explains some of the worries away, which is that a lot of people think that, oh, inclusion means that they don't get any services anymore, or they don't get accommodations, or we're not thinking individualized any longer. We're just putting all the kids together and they're getting the same thing. And in reality, inclusion is not that at all. It continues to be every student will continue to receive all those services, accommodations, and supports. And so
You know,
that,
Julie, that does make me think. One time when I was learning, like, in 1902, I was learning how to teach adults.
yeah.
One of the things that our facilitator said is that sometimes non-examples are as helpful as examples.
Mm,
So you just said it. You said what inclusion is not.
yeah.
So on this download, or in the download, on the last page, there
Hmm.
is a section of what inclusion is not. So if you go to inclusiveschooling.com/download 67 to get the handout Julie and I are talking about, it does have 5 bullets that talk about what Julie just mentioned about what it's not. And sometimes I think naming that or saying it is helpful for people. I also liked the word in what you read, Joel, that
Hmm.
said tailored, because sometimes I think we say individualized, personalized, and
Hmm.
then people think different
Hmm.
or hard or expensive or someplace else.
Hmm. Hmm.
So tailored sort of sounded like custom fit, like right there where you are.
Yeah, and it really is, Christy. And I think part of this, especially if you're a leader that hasn't experienced a lot of good examples of incredible inclusion,
Mm, good point.
sometimes we have a lack of creativity or even a lack of a model. What is it going to look like or be like? And so it's tricky to lead a group of people towards something you've not seen yourself fully. And so it's just to remind yourself that all of this is very, very possible. And at the top of that particular piece that I wrote or that I read, it's about that research shows that students learn better. And it's like, we're not going to debate the research here, but we want you to know that this is not just a whim. This is not just for fun. This is a meaningful, well researched foray into something very important for our school system.
Yeah, and I think that the research is such an important place to begin. And we'll put some links in the show notes for those of you who feel like you need, at your fingertips, credible
Mhm.
and vetted research that Julie and I have either conducted and or combined for you. I think on top of that, Julie, we can't discount the lived experiences of our students, not
Mhm.
just students who tell their stories about when they were in school and the harm that outdated practices caused, but noticing in the moment what is actually working. So we're not just doing this without, observing the effect, but we
Mhm.
want to say, look at what happens when this student is with their peers or has access, or we presume competence, or we remove barriers. Like,
Yeah.
don't just sit there and focus on where is the student, how many minutes, who got their minutes in, and all of the gnashing of teeth, but just kind of notice what starts happening in the life of the student.
Mm. And noticing that, naming it, celebrating it, seeing it, those things are the things that keep school systems moving forward in this important work. Because as anyone who's listening knows, it's not the easiest of work, but I'll tell you, it is work that is so worth it, right?
Yeah. And so Julie, let's go ahead and go to page 3 because you wanted to talk about IEPs and I brought up IEPs. So
Yeah.
again, at the download for this episode at inclusiveschooling.com/download 67, Julie's going to go down to the third page. And so at the end of the kind of phrase that she read, she said, your child, the student is still going to get what's outlined in their IEP. And my, snarky self said, I've studied IEPs for a long time and I know there are problems with them. Like, Julie, you and I know in this work, oftentimes the IEP becomes the barrier because
Mm,
as we try to move towards LRE or we try to be more universally designed and differentiate, people are like, but the IEP says, as if it has its own, you know,
persona.
yeah,
Mm,
persona and is quite, you know, authoritative.
mhm.
So what could we do at IEP meetings or what kind of scripts or sentence starters can we use to help people understand that maybe even the IEP needs to be written differently?
Well, Christy, two things.
Well, Julie,
I want to talk about I feel like that's another podcast, right? There's another
sure.
podcast here called Why IEPs Suck and Why They're Getting in the Way of Inclusion. And it is really
I wrote it
important.
down.
Okay. Um, but what we mean is often this is a revealing tab to people. When we start to do inclusive work, we start to say, oh, for example, this student is supposed to sort silverware. And instead of spoons,
And there are
forks,
no silverware in the eighth grade LRE class
right. And
period.
so what do we do? And the answer is we rewrite the IEP because you can learn to sort silverware in a different place in space and time. So all that to be said, that is another conversation. And for this, though, when we think about this key words to say,
Yeah.
it's like it's reaffirming to people that, let's say you're talking to families, you'll say your child still gets everything that's in their IEP. Supports are delivered right where your child learns. Um, we're using co-teaching and universal design for learning and small group instruction, and we're often using paraprofessional support. Um, we're going to collaborate with you every step of the way, like we always have. I think the trick about these scripts is that when you're becoming a more inclusive school, we're often explaining to families at the same time that we're working with staff that things are going to change. And it's reassuring them that we're still using the law, we're still using best practice, and we're still going to be working as a team together to get your child closer to what's the spirit of least restrictive environment.
Yeah, and again, I'll link to other podcasts where we talk about least restrictive environment. When Julie said work together, I was thinking there's another part of these talking points or in the script. It says inclusion is not about one teacher or one classroom. It's a coordinated team effort. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of like pulling back and showing people like, oh, we're all in this. Even if you don't see it or it doesn't look the way it's in the past, we're still working towards access, participation, and progress as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. And it doesn't look the same. So it's very easy to calculate that the occupational therapist took your child down the hall for 33 minutes on a Tuesday, like they were supposed to, and then they returned them because we can track those minutes. But when that same occupational therapist has worked very closely with the general ed teacher and has worked on pencil grip, scissor grasp, all the different things, and they're just putting that in the day and they're making sure that the child gets about 32 minutes also, it's like it looks different. So sometimes people think, maybe they're not getting as much.
Right.
And when we've studied this, we've found that kids get more support in inclusive settings, not less support.
And I would say even more instruction.
Yeah.
So, depending on how you define support, you could
Hmm.
say more specially designed instruction, more access, more friendship, more, goes on and on. I think I've told the story before, Julie, but when I was doing my dissertation again back in 1902, I was talking to a parent trying to get them to participate in the study and, well, their child, allow their
Hmm.
child to be in the study. And so I was explaining the purpose of the study was to look at the effects of embedding instruction around children's IEP goals within the daily routine. So I
Yeah.
had to explain what embedding was. And
Uh-huh.
this poor dad just kept looking at me. So I, of course, kept talking
Hmm.
and trying to explain embedding. And then finally he said, I just don't understand. I was like, gosh, I have no other way to explain embedding. And he's like, what else would they be doing?
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, sorry, friend. So usually they'll pull your kid out over Earthside for X
Uh-huh.
number of minutes and do some drill and kill, and then
Hmm.
they'll go back to play and daily activities. So
Yeah.
we're gonna see if we can change that.
I think the thing about that specific story is this is a parent of a child who's not experienced school yet. And so
Yeah.
that parent has no schema to understand pull out, pull over, pull aside. And they're like, it makes perfect sense to do what you're suggesting called
Yeah.
embedding. So why are you studying it? And it's like, well, that's a great question.
Yeah. Well, it's to the point we always make, like, why are we still asking the question, is inclusion effective?
Correct.
And why are we always looking for the exception to that rule when it's been like asked and answered a million times? All right, Julie,
Yes.
as we wrap up this
Hmm.
particular episode and we think about these scripts for
Hmm.
changing and for people to use, we've talked about, this kind of opening statement. We've talked about what inclusion is not. We've talked about how to use some of these scripts during an IEP meeting. What's like maybe your last tip for flipping the script or using this particular script?
Yeah. So my last tip is kind of reminding yourself that you might need key messages that
Mm.
are kind of embedded, to use that phrase.
Good one.
Thank you. But embedded throughout, which is we're going to do this together. Some of it is that research shows that this is better. Some of it is telling people, like painting the picture. People say paint the picture done, meaning paint the picture so they understand that it's co-teaching, it's universal design for learning, it's small group instruction, it's still all the good things that we're talking about, and that's what makes it actually work. Because sometimes you have to paint a picture for, like, the example of your parent that you were talking to, or for an example of that administrator who hasn't seen it done beautifully yet. You have to be someone who can move ahead and paint that picture so other people can imagine what it's going to be when it's done well. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and catch up on past episodes where we share valuable insights, straight talk, and practical steps to challenge outdated special education practices. You can find every episode with the show notes at inclusiveschooling.com/inclusion-podcast to build more inclusive schools together.